Good morning and welcome. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason on this Tuesday, March the 7th. And Jay Powell continuing testimony in front of I think it's the Senate Banking Committee. We'll bring you up all to speed on all of that. News out of China. I don't know if you saw that. Xi Jinping going right. Hey, you know what? You don't think we've lost some credibility in the world? Xi Jinping with a right cross to the United States for the first time that I can ever recall, calling out the United States by name as the war drums, I guess, keep beating here. As when you lose credibility, when you have a central bank president that has no credibility, when you have the president of your nation that has no credibility, this is the type of things that happen. This is why, again, another reason why you're seeing all the central bank gold buying that's happening. Yesterday we were kind of in awe as the World Gold Council had to make an update to how much gold central banks were actually buying. And then today, news out of the Perth Mint, the Australian Mint, that maybe, just maybe they weren't putting all the gold they were supposed to into those gold bars. We've got it all. We got a big show lined up for you today. 800-951-0592, the website at allamericangold.com. And Jason, a lot really happening in the world that, let's face it, when you start putting all these pieces together, it's not a great picture. It's not like the sky's falling and everything's going to come to an end. At least I hope not, unless it's global thermal nuclear war. What was that movie? Would you like to play a game? Well, listen, I don't like
war games.
Yeah, war games.
War games. Yeah.
Is war games gonna bust out? I don't know. I saw a picture of all of this. I don't know what to call it. Armaments, for lack of a better word, that the United States, we're like amassing this stuff in Poland, and it's starting to creep me out a little bit, right? Because I know the story is, oh yeah, these are going to Ukraine. Well, if they're going to Ukraine, then get them to Ukraine. What are they? We're just stocking up there in Poland. It makes me a little nervous.
Well, I like what you said a little bit earlier there. I woke up this morning, Joe, and found out the world didn't end. So it's time to tackle another day, so to speak. And yeah, there's a lot of war drums. But let me make one statement about China. It's interesting in 2018, 17, 18, 19, when we still had some rates kind of going up. Remember that, Joe? And a little bit of a tightening type of situation. And of course that changed in 2019. And China was printing money back then. And then coronavirus showed up, remember, Joe? And suddenly the printing presses went crazy, right? And China started tightening, right? And it's funny that you bring up Z and his name in America by name. And it was less than 2 weeks ago, they printed up over 600 billion yuans, right? Printing when the rest of the world's tightening, right? So if we look at what happened in 2018, 2019, is China was printing, and then the crash came very shortly after that. It sure seems like China's kind of leading the way as to what's going to happen to the rest of the world, Joe.
Yeah, and again, China's kind of in a different place, right? They didn't have all the giveaways that everybody else had, and now, of course, China reopening here. They came out and said, "Hey, GDP is going to be up 5%," and a lot of people are like, "Yeah, it's probably going to be more like 6 or 7." But even that, I mean, huge. Here we are. I mean, we would probably jump up and down if we could get 2% GDP growth. But it's an escalation. There's no doubt. When you heard the speech, if you haven't heard the speech, I'll give you the highlights of it, and saying that the United States has a distorted attitude towards China, about conflict and confrontation. China will keep defending the country's stance on the war in Ukraine, and it's defending its close ties to Russia. And of course, we've talked about this. Listen, we weren't wearing the white hat necessarily when it comes to Ukraine. But again, this is something unusual. He'll make out like the West, or he doesn't normally name names. The United States perceptions and views of China are seriously distorted. And they went on to say, if the United States does not hit the brakes and continues to speed down the wrong path, no amount of guardrails can prevent derailment. I wonder if that was just a little backhanded jab at the derailment in Ohio. I don't think it's there. Hey, I don't think they use that on accident, right? The irony of it all doesn't escape us here. It says no amount of guardrails can prevent derailment, which will become conflict and confrontation, and who will bear the catastrophic consequences. And that was kind of a question mark, kind of insinuating, hey, by the way, if you want to keep doing this, we're ready, I guess, to get the war drums beating. So much so, McCarthy was going to go to Taiwan. Taiwan heard this speech, called McCarthy and told them not to come. Jason, I think that's kind of a big deal. Remember Nancy Pelosi when she flew over there? Yeah, apparently not as comfortable as it needs to be. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll talk about what Jay Powell is saying next. (800-951-0592) Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason. Just before we move on to Jay Powell, China's foreign minister. I'm just going to read you some quotes. And again, this is a big change. This is not normally what we get out of China. But let me just read to you some more of this. For peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, its real threat is the separatist forces of Taiwan's independence. Its solid anchor is a one China principle. So China just reiterating, Taiwan is part of China, period, end of discussion. And its genuine guardrails are the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques. In other words, China also highlighted, hey, we have agreements in place, 3 of them, with the United States. Now, it's kind of interesting, right? Because Russia thought they had the same thing. Right? We've got the Minsk Accords, right? We have agreements. We have assurances that didn't happen. The foreign ministry then made several key observations. The Chinese people have every right to ask, why does the U.S. talk at length about respecting sovereignty and territorial integrity on Ukraine while disrespecting China's sovereignty and territorial integrity on the Taiwan question? Why does the U.S. ask China not to provide weapons to Russia while it keeps selling arms to Taiwan in direct violation of the August 17th communique? Right? In other words, hey, wait a minute, you agreed in August that you wouldn't sell weapons to Taiwan. Now, of course, we know they have. Why does the U.S. keep professing the maintenance of regional peace and stability while covertly formulating for the plan of destruction of Taiwan? And then it just goes on and on. And Jason, again, I just want to highlight to everybody, this is unheard of coming out of China. You don't see them ever naming names and direct. I mean, this was an all-out. Let's call it what it is. This was an all-out verbal escalation with China and the United States. I mean, that's all. That's all you can say it was, because that's exactly what it is.
It almost sounds a little bit too, Joe, like the business of military. In a little ways, doesn't it sound like, hey, we're building up a military, and I think we want to be the ones to supply the weapons to certain allies. Doesn't it almost sound a little bit like they're posturing for their business
you know what?
side?
Maybe laying the groundwork, right? Hey, you know what? Yeah. What's good for the goose, right, is good for the gander, right? We're gonna, hey, if that's how you're gonna operate, that's how we're gonna operate toward sort of thing. Listen, and I'm gonna say this. I don't agree with what happened in Ukraine. We made agreements, we made promises, and let's face it, we went back on those. I mean, it's just that simple. That's not a slight to any Ukrainian people. We've talked about this a million times, right? It's not the people that's the problem. And now when I'm sitting here reading all of this stuff and watching all of this stuff, all of this is unnecessary. All of it. Yet here we are continuing down this path, and sooner or later, right, what happens? Sooner or later, right, all of a sudden there's a little bit of somebody makes a miscalculation, and next thing you know, Jason, are we staring down at World War III? It doesn't need to happen.
No, but for the business of business, there'll be something. There's going to be some sort of emergency, and what World War III, maybe people think what it looks like in their minds, is probably not what it would actually be. It'll be something different. What fun is it to rule the world financially, Joe, if you blow the whole thing up, right? So there'll be something. There's going to be something, but I think it'll be something that we're not expecting, because that's the only way you can get people to scratch their heads, like when a spy balloon flies overhead. You got to do something that's confusing.
I'm going to tell you right now, this has more to do about money than people think.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This isn't about Ukraine. We've talked about it a million times. Ukraine, there's no value in Ukraine. They were they produced some wheat. They did. They had some wheat. They sold black market arms, and were heavily involved in nefarious crypto crimes. I mean, that's kind of what but that's what they're known for. So the whole thing didn't make sense. But again, I think this is more about the United States and loss of credibility. And I'm not talking about just Joe Biden. A loss of credibility of American finance. Things changed after the financial crisis, Jason, and they're not getting better. Matter of fact, it's one of those things where we keep saying it. We didn't fix what was wrong with the financial crisis. What we did, we covered it up. We did the Big Daddy, right? Remember Big Daddy, that movie with Adam Sandler? The kid wets the bed, and what does Adam Sandler do instead of stripping the bed down and washing the sheets? No, what did he do? He just put a bunch of newspaper over it. That's kind of what we did.
Yeah, Joe, that's exactly what we did, and I think in the far future, the history of this economic period, you might see that they might count the 2008 through 2030 as an economic depression or downward spiral. It might, we look at it through today's lens, but in the future, it's always looked at a little differently, isn't it?
That's an interesting point. It'll be interesting how that's looked at. It'll be very curious. The time from let's say 2011, because obviously 08 through 11 was bad. What will 2011 to, let's say, 2023, 2024, whatever date you want to put on it, how will that look in history? Will that all of a sudden, and I think you're probably right, it'll probably get gobbled up by the crisis that predated that and the crisis that's coming. And my guess is history will view that whole period. And let's is it going to be 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? That remains to be seen. But I think you're probably right. Is they'll probably view that whole the two crisis, the one before it, the one after it that's coming, and probably mold it all into the same one.
Well, Joe, 1929 was the market crash. That's 2008. 1933 was the Depression. So I think that's kind of where we're at, right? And then what happened in World War II? So I don't know. There's a lot of similarities right in front of our face.
Fed Chairman Jerome Powell was testifying, and it still is testifying as we speak. And it was kind of funny because I heard it once about disinflation, and his only comment was, it hasn't shown up. So, okay. So I guess that the 11 times you said it in your speech before, that was just hope and gander. But he did say the latest economic data has come in stronger than expected. Which data is he talking about? Which data is he talking? Because there's only two things that have come in stronger than expected. Jobs, which everybody's scratching their head, right? Everyone's like, I don't know, something's not right. But, how shocked would I be if they months from now, a year from now, oh, there was a spreadsheet error, right? And the jobs, we were creating jobs, but not quite that many. And the other one's inflation. That's it, right? All the other data, Jason, hasn't come in strong at all. But anyway, he gets to set his own narrative. He says the economic data has come in stronger than expected. It suggests that the ultimate level of interest rates, the ultimate level, is likely to be higher than previously anticipated. So remember what the anticipation was. The anticipation on Wall Street was about 5%, right? That was kind of the hope of Wall Street. Now, the Federal Reserve, their anticipation, depending on who you talk to, was between 5 and 5.5%. And I want to say the Fed's official stance was about 5.4%. So Jay Powell today is letting people know that number has now gone higher than 5.4. So if you think about what Jason was saying before, hey, they only do quarter of a point. So right now we're between 5.5 and 5.25. We raise next week a quarter of a point. Then it's 4.75 to 5. Right, you go 6 more weeks, right? You get to 5.25. Jason, all of a sudden, Jay Powell saying we're going to go a quarter of a point for the rest of the year. I mean, that's kind of what he just said, because, you need to go above 5.4. That's at least 5 more rate hikes. Well, that's, they only meet every 6 weeks. I mean, that's 30 more weeks. That's pretty much the whole rest of the year.
Correct. And I remember, I'll keep saying it, last year the New York Fed chief was saying that June's CPI would be about 6.8. So, we could just be seeing quarter point rate hikes into 2024, and it'll just be, it'll just be the safe thing to do, right, Joe? It's just, it'll be expected. It'll become normal, kind of like inflation. Rate hikes in 2022 finally became normal about 2/3 of the way through the year. It's like, okay, well, it's happening. There's nothing we can do about it. Well, by the middle of the 2/3 of the way through this year, the quarter point rate hike will just be the new normal thing. We'll just slowly see what happens, because Joe, I think they don't want to break it until sometime next year. I think they're timing this thing. Don't break it. Just don't break it yet. And they're probably talking to these big companies, make sure they do their stock buybacks, and tell everyone to keep this boat floating. Just you bucket all the water out as fast as you can, and then when they let it go, it's just going to sink. It's going to sink like a rock, isn't it?
Yeah, he reiterated that they are still going meeting by meeting. We're going to make the decision meeting by meeting. And his one mention of disinflation, there is little sign of disinflation. 5 weeks ago, you gave a big speech talking about the big risk to the economy was disinflation, 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 disinflation. And now all of a sudden, we looked everywhere. We looked under the bed. We looked in the closet, right? We checked under the mattress. Jason, they were in the bathroom looking for it. They went in the attic. They cleaned out the garage. They couldn't find it.
I think it's, maybe to his defense, who works a job and wants to say I've made mistakes and messed it up. There's not a lot of people that do that. I mean, some people will admit to their mistakes, but I mean, I think he just needs to say whatever that meeting needs to be said to keep everyone calm, right? I'm sure when the Titanic was sinking, there was guys running around telling everybody it'll be okay, everybody stay calm. There's probably still guys doing that, even though the ship was sinking, right, Joe? That's what he does every meeting. Well, disinflation worked at that meeting, but that was completely wrong. Transitory, that was good for a little while, but that was wrong, right?
Well, I guess that's as close as we're going to get to I was wrong. We don't see any side of it. We don't see any side of it. Well, this is why you buy gold. Because these central bankers, they're wrong way more than they're right. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back.